So we're now going to construct our smaller purse. So we have our lining panels with our zipper in the middle, and we have our exterior panel with our aperture cut. It doesn't really matter which way you have your zipper orientated, because this is kind of the same either way. But for some reason, I generally always have it the way that I would actually have it when I make my bag. So opening from left to right. So you're going to position your exterior panel over the top of your lining panel. Your lining panels are right side down, making sure that your zipper sits centrally in that aperture. From the reverse, you should have a very small gap on either side. It's literally just a tiny weeny gap. Now, if you're not confident that you can do this without pinning or sticking or kind of gluing, you can actually pop a little line of Fabri-Tac down the side of the zippers just to kind of hold that in place. I don't like doing it simply because I'm not very good with glue, so I tend to position it, move it to where I want it to be on the machine, and then stitch. Now I'm going to stitch around the outside of that zipper aperture using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If I've got a thread caught there, that's going to annoy me. And I've left a long thread on the top and the bottom because we're going to tie off the same way as I do right the way through this pattern. So you'll probably be fed up with doing it by the end of it, but it will make a difference to the overall look of your nippies once you've finished. Be careful you don't sew through the zipper head. My foot that I'm using is a Teflon cording foot, which is really not designed as a zipper foot, but it's very good as a zipper foot, so that's why I like to use it. I also use it for piping, all sorts of things. It's kind of my one size fits all foot. And I'm stitching at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And that's most specifically important when you come up the ends of the zipper. So when you cross over the zipper, you don't want to be too far away from it, otherwise you're going to find that you're too close to the edge. So as I come across the end of my zipper, I'm just going to go slowly because I want my needle to just slip down between the teeth of my zipper. And I'm using a nylon zipper, so my teeth the needle will just slip down between them quite easily. If you're using a metal zipper, then you may find it's more difficult and you possibly have to remove some of the teeth to stitch across. This is a number 3 zipper, so it's only a small, narrowish zip. No, it just go further, just a little tiny bit. That's better. Again, coming back over those teeth. I'm landing in the same hole as I started my stitching in. I'm going to raise my foot, raise my needle, and leave nice long threads. And as we did before, I'm going to take the threads from the front, use a self-threading needle, go through the hole that I just made to the reverse, and tie off those ends. And just trim off. So now we have our zipper perfectly fitted within our zipper aperture. Now we're going to lay that whole panel right sides down, so the exterior is facing down, and I'm just going to take the 2 lining panels and bring them up and away from the exterior panel, and I'm going to match up those bottom corners. and just clip them so that I know that they're level. And I'm going to come along to where the side is, and now you can see that the, oh, I don't know if you can actually, the exterior fabric and the lining fabric, you can pull them away slightly because there is that 5/8 of an inch gap. And I'm just going to match up my lining right the way up the side, making sure that I don't actually attach my exterior fabric at all. So it's just the lining, and we're just going to sew the lining. We're not sewing the exterior fabric at this point. I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So you can kind of bend, or you can almost bend your exterior piece out of the way. Fold your zipper in half, if you like, to ensure that everything's lined up. Now I'm just going to change my foot because I don't like sewing the outside of the pocket with a zipper foot. I'm a great one for using the wrong foot for everything, but zipper feet I don't like using for anything other than zippers. So having made sure that all of my lining is now fully matched up, and you can see where I've kind of just I can pull that away, and that's what I need to do so that I can stitch, because I want to stitch all the way down this side along the bottom and back up the other side, but I do not want to stitch through my exterior fabric. So I'm just going to pull my exterior fabric out of the way, giving myself enough room to start my stitching. Now if you've got a really wide foot on your machine, and I have some machines have an incredibly wide foot, you may find you need to use a zipper foot to do this because there's not a lot of room, but you're going to stitch around the outside of your pocket lining using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, when you come to the other side, just pull the exterior fabric out of the way. Okay, there you go. You can see that I've not actually gone through my exterior fabric because I've just pulled it out of the way. And I'm going to trim down the seam allowance by approximately half. Thread there, let's get rid of that. And then we can fold our exterior back over again. Your lining should sit nicely within your purse, so it's not actually impeding on the raw edges, it sits inside. And I'm going to match those bottom corners up. Oh, something's pinging. I'll just ignore that. As perfectly as I can. And if you've cut with a rotary cutter and a ruler and you've measured and cut accurately, you should find that this matches up perfectly. There we go. So that's all fully secured, and I'm just going to stitch around the outside edges, and I'm doing that at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'll start at the top corner next to my zipper, and I usually just do one back stitch right at the beginning because there's nowhere to bury your threads in this at this point. So just one back stitch just to secure my stitching. You take this nice and slowly because it's important this will be visible. And because this is construction, I tend to do slightly smaller stitch length than I would if I were just top stitching. So where I normally would perhaps use a 4, I'm using a 3.5 because this is actually, although it's top stitching, it's construction as well. So you need your stitching to be nice and snug and secure. Go nice and slow, it's not a race. I'm happy with that. Let's go. Sorry, I'm concentrating, so I've gone really quiet. And if you've got any tiny little slithers that have just where your fabric's moved, you can just trim them off. I've got a tiny little bit, but it is really a tiny bit. And that's your first part of your purse completed. So you can see it's fully lined. There's no zipper tape showing on the inside, which is a real bugbear for me. And she's ready to be slotted into the front pocket of your main purse. So we'll get on and look at how we make our main purse next.